Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf
Of our warriors. And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a nice little show for you today. First, I will present the news as always. That'll be followed by our report from Mr. German Aid to Ukraine, and then we'll maybe have a little discussion, and that'll be followed by Q&A from you guys. So if you have any questions in the live chat, feel free to type them in at any point and ask, and we'll do our best to answer them towards the end. So yeah, with that, if you could, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button for the stream. It really helps us out. I know it's probably annoying that I have to do that every time or that you guys have to hear that every time, but it's really, really important, particularly because every week it's kind of a crapshoot whether or not we are given monetization or not. We don't really care about the money itself. We just pay any money that we make if we ever took it. I don't think we've actually taken any YouTube money yet. It would just go to maintaining the website and stuff. We're a nonprofit. We're not doing this for money, but having monetization rights is really important for YouTube promoting our stuff. And they demonetize like every other video, something like that. So they just don't like the subject matter. They don't like that we cover this spicy geopolitical topics where, people are fighting, in such a way that they might not be around the next day. They don't like that stuff. So it's very important and very helpful to us that you guys just kind of cut through all that noise and just like and subscribe. That kind of tells YouTube, like, we don't care that these guys are spicy. They're doing good work. So we really, really appreciate your guys' help. We get like a lot of support for how big our audience is from you guys. So thanks so much. Like everything we do, it's only possible because you guys have been there supporting us like so strongly. So thanks again. And yeah, we just implore you, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on social media on Twitter and Blue Sky. Those are the two ones we hang out on. Feel free to mention us on other platforms where we don't talk as much. And we also have a website, tochnyi.info. Check that out. It's got a lot of cool research. So without any further delay, no more advertisements, I will go ahead and jump into the news. These are the main headlines as of January 19th, 2025. There were a significant number of strikes on Russia this week by Ukrainian drones. I've done my best to compile the information, and I apologize for any possible redundancy. A fire erupted at an oil storage facility in Engels, Russia on January 8th following a drone attack reportedly carried out by Ukraine, and it's been successfully extinguished according to the region's governor. Busargin acknowledged the ongoing efforts at the site and expressed gratitude to emergency responders and rescue teams who have been working tirelessly. By the morning of January 12th, the governor stated that a controlled process of burning off residual fuel was still in progress. Additionally, debris from the attack struck an industrial facility in Engels, although he did not name the location. Ukraine stated that the operation aimed to hit a fuel storage site at the Krystal complex, which supplies the Engels 2 military airbase. 2 emergency responders lost their lives while combating the flames, and as a result, local authorities declared a state of emergency in Engels. Despite concerns from residents over thick smog in the area, Russia's Natural Resources Monitoring Agency assured the public that air pollution levels remain within safe limits. Ukraine launched a widespread attack early Tuesday targeting factories and energy infrastructure deep within Russia. Reports that Ukraine struck a gunpowder factory in Tambov Oblast during the night of January 16th. Residents in the town of Kotovsk reported hearing drone engine sounds, suggesting that the aircraft were headed towards the facility in Kuzminogad village, approximately 450 kilometers from the border. According to Russian media channels, the drones originated from Kharkiv, located roughly 500 kilometers from the targeted factory. Eyewitnesses described spotting multiple drones and observing flashes in the sky. However, Russian authorities have not officially confirmed the attack or disclosed any resulting damage. The targeted Gunpowder Factory is reportedly a critical supplier of explosive materials for Russia's military, producing components such as gunpowder for weapons, artillery, and rocket systems, as well as specialized explosives. Ukrainian officials have also not commented on the incident, but Andriy Kovalenko, the head of Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, suggested that this is not the first strike on the facility. In Voronezh Oblast, Governor Alexander Gusev reported that over 10 drones attacked an oil depot in the Lysky district. The drones managed to penetrate the protective netting over the stored tanks and caused a fire. Belgorod Oblast is also reported to have experienced heavy strikes across several districts, with local authorities attributing the attacks to both drones and artillery fire. Ukrainian drones also targeted the Ludinovskoye oil depot, operated by the Kaluga Neftprodukt company in the city of Ludinovo in the Kaluga region, according to reports from the Astra Telegram channel and local residents. The depot includes 9 storage tanks with a combined capacity of 6,700 cubic meters. It primarily stores AI-92 and AI-95 gasoline and diesel fuel. This is not the first attack on the facility. In April 2024, a strike involving 2 aircraft-type drones caused a significant explosion in a gasoline tanker holding nearly 700 cubic meters of fuel. Another attack in November targeted the oil depot in the city of Kaluga itself. There are also additional unconfirmed reports of potential damage to the Typhoon weapons manufacturing enterprise in Kaluga. The facility is known for producing advanced military hardware, including the Bal-E coastal missile system and the Monolith B mobile coastal radio reconnaissance complex. It also manufactures components for anti-aircraft missile and artillery systems, as well as power supplies for naval equipment. On the night of January 18th, a series of drone strikes reportedly targeted an oil depot in Russia's Tula region, where at least 10 drones struck the facility. The governor of the Tula region confirmed that a fuel tank caught fire at a local enterprise and that firefighting teams were actively working to contain the blaze. Eyewitness reports and footage shared online depicted drones striking the facility, which is said to support the logistical operations of Russia's military. In other operations news, a critical coal mine in the village of Pischane near Pokrovsk in Donetsk Oblast has been intentionally destroyed to prevent Russian forces from utilizing it for troop movements. The mine, known as Number 3, held strategic importance due to its proximity to the front line and its role in supplying high-grade coal to Ukrainian steelmakers. According to reports, the mine's entrance became increasingly hazardous because of sustained Russian shelling. In early December 2024, miners began accessing the mine through an alternative entry point, significantly extending the time required for descent up to 2 hours. They used conveyor belts, typically meant for transporting coal, to exit the mine more quickly. However, frequent attacks disrupted the power and ventilation systems, often forcing emergency evacuations. Despite these challenges, efforts to keep the mine operational were deemed vital for Ukraine's economy. The coal it produced is essential for domestic steel production, supporting critical industries during the war. The mine was operated by Metinvest, which manages other facilities in the region still under Ukrainian control. The New York Times reported that explosives have been planted at 2 additional Metinvest mines, although it is unclear if these have yet been detonated. Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued an order calling reservists for military training, with the directive affecting citizens who will be assigned to the Russian Armed Forces, National Guard, Ministry of Emergency Situations, state security agencies, and the Federal Security Service. The Astra Telegram channel released the document, which outlines the conscription but does not specify the training's duration. The decree tasks executive authorities with organizing and overseeing the conscription process and training camps. While such annual training camps are customary in Russia, this year's exercise may have a different significance. Speculation suggests that reservists would face intensified efforts to encourage or coerce them into signing contracts with the Russian military. Reports have also raised concerns about potential contract signing abuses, including the possibility of forged signatures, a tactic previously reported with Russian conscripts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has decided to allocate mobilized personnel exclusively to reinforce existing combat brigades within the defense forces, rather than create new units. Journalist Yuri Butusov, citing insider sources, reported that this decision followed a meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's staff where Zelensky reviewed the current state of military operations. The change comes in response to issues faced by recently established units, such as the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade, which was formed in May of 2024. The newer brigades have struggled to match the operational effectiveness of more seasoned units due to inexperienced leadership, inadequate training, and lack of critical resources like reconnaissance drones and modern equipment. Consequently, they are unable to operate independently in certain high-pressure areas along the front line. This decision aims to address the long-standing challenge of resource allocation. Veteran brigades, which have faced reduced priority in personnel and equipment distribution, have experienced a gradual decline in combat effectiveness. By focusing resources on these experienced units, the government seeks to enhance their readiness and maintain their crucial role in ongoing military operations. The Ukrainian company Skyetan has introduced a laser guidance system for precision munitions to its ACS-3 Raybird reconnaissance drone, marking a significant advancement in military technology. This new system was demonstrated in a recent operation, with footage shared by blogger Yaga Levine. During the mission, the drone operator identified targets in an urban area using a thermal imaging channel. The system detected heat signatures in a building, and the operator engaged the laser guidance module to designate the target. While maintaining a considerable distance from the building, the ACS-3 directed a munition that successfully struck the target on the first attempt. This capability addresses a critical challenge in urban warfare for Ukraine, where conventional weapons often miss initial shots, giving targets time to escape. The precision of a laser guidance system ensures an immediate and accurate strike, achieving results that conventional methods struggle to match. Alexei Bulldozer, the head of Skyetan's operations department, highlighted the system's modularity, noting that the targeting module can be replaced in under 30 seconds. He explained that the development of the system spanned 2 years and involved extensive investments and contributions from Skyetan's R&D team of over 100 members. Approximately 300 North Korean soldiers have been reportedly killed and 2,700 injured while participating in Russia's conflict with Ukraine, according to a South Korean lawmaker citing information from the nation's intelligence agency. The deployment is believed to be part of a larger agreement between North Korea and Russia, where North Korean leader Kim Jong-un allegedly sent over 10,000 troops to aid Moscow in exchange for technical support for Pyongyang's weapons and satellite programs, which remain heavily sanctioned. Over the weekend, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the capture of 2 North Korean soldiers, releasing a video showing their interrogation. The development has raised the prospect of a potential prisoner exchange involving the combatants and captured Ukrainian troops. Reports suggest the deployment of North Korean forces, including members of the elite Storm Corps, has expanded into Russia's Kursk region. The high casualty figures, over 3,000 combined deaths and injuries, are attributed to their lack of familiarity with modern warfare tactics. According to South Korean intelligence, the troops are being used in roles that expose them to high risks, leading to significant losses. Documents recovered from fallen soldiers reveal that North Korean authorities pressured troops to avoid capture at all costs, with instructions to do something YouTube doesn't want me to say or detonate themselves if surrounded. Some soldiers were reportedly motivated to fight by promises of amnesty or opportunities to join North Korea's ruling Workers' Party seeking improved social standing. One striking incident involved a North Korean soldier who, attempting to evade capture, shouted allegiance to General Kim Jong-un and tried to detonate a grenade before being neutralized. South Korean intelligence noted the harsh conditions the soldiers face, noting the combination of coercion, poor training for contemporary conflict, and extreme methods imposed by their leadership has resulted in devastating losses. Finnish authorities disclosed on January 13th that the crew of the Russian-affiliated oil tanker Eagle S, part of the so-called Shadow Fleet, was preparing to target additional underwater infrastructure when the vessel was intercepted. The revelation comes amidst heightened tensions in the Baltic Sea region following a series of incidents involving the damage of power cables, telecommunication links, and gas pipelines since the invasion of Ukraine. The Eagle S, registered under the Cook Islands and transporting Russian oil, is suspected of posing a significant threat to the Estlink 1 power cable and the Baltic Connector gas pipeline connecting Finland and Estonia. Finnish authorities boarded the vessel on December 26, with the National Bureau of Investigation stating that further damage to critical underwater infrastructure was an imminent risk. The tanker is already implicated in earlier damage to Estlink 2 and 4 telecommunications lines. Finnish investigators allege the crew dragged the vessel's anchor across the seabed for 100 kilometers, causing a significant disruption. The investigation has been broadened to include a 9th suspect among the crew, all of whom are subject to travel bans. The captain, a Georgian national, leads a crew primarily consisting of individuals from Georgia and India. Up next, we have economy and aid. The U.S. government under President Joe Biden has unveiled previously classified details of its assistance to Ukraine's drone development initiatives, which included $1.5 billion in funding allocated in September of 2024, according to the New York Times. This revelation is sourced from unnamed officials and sheds light on a significant yet largely hidden facet of U.S. support for Ukraine. Among the key successes attributed to the efforts are Ukrainian maritime drones, which reportedly inflicted severe damage on Russia's Black Sea Fleet, and aerial drones, which have been instrumental in stalling Russia's advances in the eastern regions of Ukraine. By the close of 2024, Ukraine is known to have delivered more than 200,000 domestically produced drones to frontline units. Italy is providing Ukraine with a new military aid package that includes advanced weaponry, as announced by Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov following a meeting with Italian Defense Minister Guido Crosetto in Kyiv. The shipment aims to enhance Ukraine's capability to carry out impactful strikes against Russian forces. During their discussions, the two ministers also committed to deepening defense collaboration between their nations. They explored opportunities to strengthen cooperation in the defense industry, including plans to establish joint ventures and other initiatives designed to bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities. Crosetto reiterated Italy's unwavering support for Ukraine and emphasized the need to expand international military cooperation under the Ramstein format. The shipment marks the 10th installment of Italian military assistance since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. The United States has imposed sanctions on 6 Russian oil tankers still under construction at the Zvezda shipyard, as reported by Reuters on January 17th. These sanctions are part of a broader campaign targeting over 180 vessels linked to Russia's Shadow Fleet, a group of older tankers often used to bypass international sanctions. This is the first time that the U.S. has sanctioned vessels before they were operational or carried restricted cargo. Reuters detailed that Sovcomflot, a Russian company under sanctions, acquired 2 of the ships, and the remaining 4 were purchased by Rosneftflot, a shipping subsidiary of the sanctioned Russian energy giant Rosneft. Industry experts indicate that these measures have led to an increase in the cost of tankers as demand for vessels free of sanctions has risen. These sanctions also extended to 2 major Russian oil producers, Gazprom Neft and Surgutneftgaz, along with numerous subsidiaries. The companies collectively produce more than 1 million barrels of oil per day, generating an estimated $23 billion in annual revenue, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. Also, the U.S. Department of Treasury has unveiled new measures targeting a sophisticated network of Russian and Chinese entities designed to evade international sanctions. These actions represent a significant intensification in efforts to limit Russia's access to global financial systems and advanced technologies. At the core of the sanctions is a network of regional clearing platforms identified in both Russia and China. These platforms are reportedly used to facilitate cross-border transactions for restricted goods, circumventing international restrictions. The Treasury named 15 of these entities and 1 individual involved, including 6 Russian organizations and 9 Chinese firms. The measures also highlight U.S. concerns about China's role in aiding Russia's military capabilities despite existing sanctions. According to the Deputy Treasury Secretary, the measures aim to disrupt Russia's ability to bypass sanctions and acquire materials necessary for its military actions in Ukraine. Among the organizations targeted is Kyrgyzstan-based OJSC Karamet Bank, which reportedly collaborated with Russian officials, and Pромsvязьbank, a sanctioned Russian bank, to implement evasion schemes. The bank was allegedly acquired in 2024 by interests tied to a Russian oligarch to establish a hub for sanctions evasion. Several major Russian financial institutions, including Sberbank, Alfa-Bank, Sovcombank, T-Bank, and Bank Tochka, have also been implicated in the clearing platform scheme. These institutions are previously subject to U.S. sanctions but are now further entangled in the crackdown. The State Department has also complemented these actions by sanctioning another 150 entities and individuals with a primary focus on Russia's defense industry and its international supporters. India has announced plans to stop using oil tankers sanctioned by the United States for their involvement in transporting goods for Russia. An Indian government official speaking anonymously due to the sensitivity of the matter stated that the vessels will be prohibited from unloading cargo in India. However, exemptions apply to tankers chartered before January 10th, provided they complete unloading by March 12th. The official noted the broader consequences of the sanctions would become evident within around 2 months. Despite the challenges, the official indicated that the oil supply is not expected to be a major issue as a result. OPEC nations have a surplus production capacity of 3 million barrels a day, and additional supplies can be sourced from non-OPEC producers such as the US, Canada, Brazil, and Guyana. Indian refiners are currently in talks for long-term agreements with Middle Eastern suppliers and may seek additional volumes depending on market conditions. However, Indian refiners might lose access to discounted Russian crude if availability decreases due to the sanctions. The official suggested that Russia would likely find alternative methods to deliver its oil to India. Meanwhile, Indian banks will require proof of origin for all oil shipments to ensure compliance with sanctions and avoid dealings with restricted suppliers. EJSC Ukernafta has completed its first drilling operation in over a decade at one of its newest and most promising oil fields, according to a company statement. The field was discovered in 1990 and presents a significant logistical and operational challenge due to its location at 1,080 meters above sea level in a mountainous region with limited infrastructure. To enhance the production, the company plans to construct 10 additional wells, with 5 slated for 2025 and the remaining 5 for 2026. Efforts are also underway to expand pipeline capacity as existing infrastructure is insufficient to handle the anticipated production increase. The company's director highlighted the complexity of the operation, noting that external operators declined involvement due to the site's difficulty. Ukernafta has instead relied on its own drilling equipment to carry out the project. The field's last major infrastructure updates occurred in 2011. Up next, we have international relations. Iran has reportedly initiated covert diplomatic efforts aimed at securing Russian support and expertise for advancing its nuclear program, according to a report by The Times that cites Western intelligence sources. These efforts have included trips to Moscow by a prominent advisor to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Ali Larijani is said to have held discussions with Russian officials during multiple visits in late 2024. Beyond nuclear assistance, Iran is allegedly pursuing advanced military equipment, such as the latest version of Russia's Su-35 fighter jet. Iran has also expressed interest in rebuilding its air defense infrastructure, which suffered significant destruction during Israeli strikes last year. The report also suggests that Iran is seeking Russian help in rearming Hezbollah, an ally whose weapon stockpiles have been severely diminished due to recent Israeli military actions. This resulted in a significant agreement signed by Russian President Vladimir Putin and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on January 17th, which focused on defense collaboration, intelligence sharing, and the development of nuclear energy, according to reports from the Russian Telegram channel TASS. The agreement reportedly includes provisions for advancing military technical cooperation between the two nations, and the collaboration may provide Russia with avenues to circumvent Western sanctions, leveraging its connections with Iran to sustain its geopolitical ambitions. Notably, the agreement does not include a mutual defense clause, reflecting the limitations in Russia's capacity to commit significant military resources beyond its ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Instead, Russia appears to prioritize its agreements with North Korea to address its manpower shortages, as Iran is unlikely to contribute personnel to support Russian military operations. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Ukraine on an unannounced visit, marking his first meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky since taking office. During the visit, the UK and Ukraine are signing an agreement designed to enhance their defense collaboration and provide additional military support to Kyiv. Called a 100-year partnership, the agreement seeks to not only solidify defense relations but also foster economic cooperation in areas such as science and technology. Starmer is set to announce a £40 million funding aimed at Ukraine's economic recovery. The funds will prioritize businesses focused on green initiatives and assist vulnerable populations while also creating opportunities for British companies. The pledge builds on the UK's existing support for Ukraine, which includes about £8 billion in military assistance as part of a total commitment of around £13 billion. New footage from the Telegram channel Astra reportedly reveals a makeshift detention facility within a police station in Chechnya where Russian men were held in place of local convicts. The detainees claim that Chechen inmates avoided deployment to Ukraine for high-risk missions by bribing officials, who then detained other men as replacements. Those who are imprisoned report enduring months of confinement under poor conditions, including inadequate food and limited access to basic facilities. The videos were shared on January 14th and focus on a facility in the police department of Nozha Yurt, a Chechen village. Astra claims the men featured in the footage had intended to join military operations in Ukraine under contract, but were instead confined and sent into combat in place of convicted Chechens who paid bribes. Astra reportedly obtained the footage from detainees and their families, although the exact recording dates are unclear. The detainees alleged that authorities seized their identification documents and held them in a basement for extended periods. The footage depicts approximately 10 men sleeping on the floor in a minimally furnished room. Complaints include being denied bathing facilities and having only a clogged toilet for sanitation. The prisoners claim they were sold as replacements for Chechen men who avoided deployment. They allege that bribes ranging from 250,000 to 500,000 rubles, around 2,500 to 5,000 US dollars, allowed Chechen convicts to avoid combat, while those detained received no compensation. One detainee stated that he had been held since early November. One prisoner's mother recounted that he had been promised a substantial sum to join the military and remain in Chechnya, only to be detained and reportedly used as a replacement for a Chechen convicted of driving under the influence. She stated that he had not signed any contract or received the promised payment. This month, Russia's Federal Security Service published a comprehensive list of the Russian government's intensified crackdown on migrants over the past year has had a range of consequences, including worsening labor shortage and increased street violence. Another outcome has been the severe overcrowding in migrant detention centers, forcing many detainees to be held in prisons under harsh conditions. According to a report by a Radio Liberty affiliate in Kazakhstan, numerous Central Asian migrants are being held in Russian prisons due to a lack of space in detention centers. The overcrowding stems from widespread raids on undocumented immigrants following the deadly terrorist attack in Crocus City Hall. In areas like the Sverdlovsk region, overcrowding has forced authorities to use prisons for deportation detainees. Migrants report substandard living conditions, with many saying they have been denied hot meals since late December 2024. One detainee described subsisting on bread and noted that even instant noodles were prohibited in the facility. Efforts by families to deliver traditional foods like samsa and plov have been rebuffed, with prison staff emphasizing that the facility is not a detention center for migrants. The footage shared by migrants reveals cramped prison cells with dirty walls, metal-barred windows, and minimal furnishing, including bunk beds, a small table, and a sink with a toilet partition. Many detainees expressed frustration, stating that they were treated as criminals despite being in custody for administrative violations. Some acknowledged minor infractions, such as expired residency permits, while others claimed they were arrested entirely without cause. The deputy head of the Tajikistan consulate's public council in Yekaterinburg confirmed that the use of prisons is a temporary solution. He assured the detainees would be transferred to proper detention centers once space became available. From January to July, the Russian government reported a significant increase in deportations and entry bans, targeting migrants primarily from Central Asia. Over 143,000 individuals were denied entry during this period, while nearly 93,000 were deported, figures that reflect a sharp rise compared to the previous year. And that's it for the news this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, and that's apparently me. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine in a short segment. We start with an update on military aid delivered by Germany, which was made public on Tuesday by the German government. In the past 3 weeks, Germany has delivered the following military assistance to Ukraine: 600 HF-1 loitering munitions, 46 RQ-35 Hydrogen UAVs, 43 Songbird UAVs, 50 Vector UAVs, 20 FFG MRAPs, 495 Heckler & Koch 416 assault rifles, 11,120 mm mortar rounds, 19,000 122 shells, 14,000 155 shells, ammunition for the Leopard 1A5 mm tanks, 65 field glasses, 24,200 wool blankets, 120,000 chest shields, and 30,200 tourniquets. And already last but not least, on Wednesday, the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs has made public that Germany has provided them with 74 vehicles, which will soon be deployed with the National Police of Ukraine and the National Guard of Ukraine. These two will use these vehicles to maintain public order and protect critical infrastructure. Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Ihor Klimenko, and the German ambassador to Ukraine, Martin Yaga, attended the ceremonial handover of these vehicles. And yeah, that's already it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
We've got an update. It's actually only 5 vehicles, they said. No, I'm just kidding.
We had a little conversation, just for information. We had a little conversation about this because Ukraine apparently said that they have to, that Germany has delivered 100 vehicles. Then a day later, the German embassy was going out and said they have delivered about 80 vehicles, and in the end, it was 74. So yeah. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. I have a couple more things I wanted to bother you about. So this week, the AfD, which is the German far right party, they published their party platform, I guess is how you would explain it. And as they didn't really condemn the Russian invasion. I'll be honest, it's it's a little weird to expect them to, or I don't quite understand why it was international news that they that it wasn't in there. Like I can understand if they said something about it or something, but anyway, it was kind of big news in the international press that this happened, and then there were some like responses from various German politicians. So I guess like, what do you make of that whole circus? Is it just kind of par for the course, or do you think there's something significant there?
Well, I don't think it's anything significant, not really noteworthy, since the AfD is the far rights. Erlend, you said this video is not getting monetized anyway, right? So you can insult them.
You can insult them, of course.
Okay, yeah. So they're the far right Putin bootlickers with an IQ of of a toaster or something. So yeah, they were since day one against, with a very very few exceptions, against helping Ukraine, and like I said, they're Putin bootlickers, so of course they're for peace, and that's what they're saying on a daily basis. Same as the BSV, which is also Putin bootlickers, just on the left side, and yeah. So it's nothing really noteworthy in my opinion. They say this on a daily basis.
Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to bring up was the German defense minister made a little trip to Kyiv, had a little few discussions. I guess just as someone who maybe just probably had to follow it, I assume out of like for journalistic reasons, you probably followed it reasonably closely. What is there anything in this trip that was new information, or did you get anything out of seeing any of these discussions that like led you to believe anything? There's like a new information or a new diplomatic thing going on.
So I think most of the trip to Kiev was really just a political signal, in my opinion, because in theory here in Germany nothing has changed in the past months, right? We don't have a budget, so we can't announce like huge new military assistance, like €1 billion package or whatever, because there's no money for it. Since all of the 4 billion allocated for 2025 is already planned for, so it's already earmarked. There's nothing over which we could say, okay, we are buying this or we're buying that. So mostly just a political signal saying, hey, Germany stands on your side. Doesn't matter if it's the current government or another government. I mean, we're short before the elections, right? So it's mainly just a political signal. There was one thing which was quite odd. Last week, not this week, last week during the latest UDCG meeting at Ramstein, Germany, or more specific, the German Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, announced that Germany would deliver nearly 50 IRIS-T missiles at short notice to Ukraine. I think it's 48, which would be a couple of reloads for the IRIS-T systems. And during the latest visit, Ukraine put out, or the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense put out a press statement where they said that Germany would deliver, what did they say? I believe it was like 60 missiles. And I'm not really sure right now if that's in addition, if we just added about 10 missiles, or if they will deliver both, because it was a very, very short timeline. It's 2 times announced the same stuff, just in different quantities. I think it will be in addition, because the Ukrainians said in their press release that this was a result of the visit which took place, and of course the first messages were announced a week before the visit. So I think it will be in total about like 100 to 110 IRIS-T missiles, which will be delivered to Ukraine in the next weeks. And yeah, that's the only thing which was really, really new. There was, of course, discussions about like investing in the Ukrainian defense industry and all that kind of stuff, but nothing noteworthy yet.
Yeah, it seems like kind of almost like a thing about political culture where like some countries, it seems like it feels important that they come with something in their hand, right? Like when there's a big press conference, they to the point where they'll say stuff that they've already promised or even delivered, and it confuses us because then we hear a statement and we're like, are they sending 50 new IFVs? And it's like, no, that's just what they already pledged, and they felt like they needed to say something when they were on that podium, right? So, but I think the Germans, it seems like you guys are pretty straightforward about all this, and the aid you promised is the aid you promised, and you're not going to go announce a new thing. I'm sure other high level discussions were had, but yeah, so it sounds like just pretty much a standard visit. I just like really quick, I forgot to mention this about the other thing, the politicians. In Finland, there was just a brief story. I kind of cut it, that there's like a left party there, and there was like a member of their party that was saying like super Russian-y talking points about Ukraine and stuff, and I assume about Finland and all that. And the party like expelled him. So I don't know, it was kind of an interesting little tidbit there. I don't have a lot more information on it. Maybe if there's anyone Finnish in the audience, if they have any more context, it'd be fun. Yeah, so those are my little extra stories that I didn't cover in the main news. Mr. Erlend, I see you have something on screen there. You got a cheeky little drone boy. Could you describe what we're looking at?
Well, so this is one of the classical Magyar videos where they destroy artillery tubes with precision FPV drone strikes. You can see first the drone approaching the target, and then second drone comes and actually inspects if they hit the tube. So you can see there's a hole. That means that artillery piece is pretty much disabled. You can probably replace the tube, but as we know, Russia is not really. They don't really have enough artillery tubes, and yeah, the very effective way of taking out enemy artillery. I just thought that since we probably are going to get demonetized anyways, we can risk it. I just also want to promote the incredible work that Magyar Birds is doing and how incredibly effective it is. Yeah.
Yeah, among the best, I would say, in Ukraine and just in the world, probably at this point.
Yeah, definitely so, the best drone unit in the world. Also, for those that didn't know, Magyar Birds that was reformed into regiments last year is already becoming a brigade, adding a bunch of battalions and logistics support units and stuff. So they need a lot of equipment, more personnel, but they are very, very capable in organizing and training drone pilots and signalists, etc., that are needed. Very professional, very capable people that run the brigade. So it's going to be interesting to see how effective they're going to be in a year or 6 months when they've more than doubled in size.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of these videos, but I know, like, on the server, like sort of the equivalent of like around the office, I hear the OSINT guys a lot like, oh, did you see the new Magyar video? Like, oh yeah. Like there's always talk about it when they do something.
Yeah, well, the thing is that they regularly drop videos like this, but sometimes there's just absolutely insanity. And last week, for instance, there was one there where they were a little bit 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, they had one where they absolutely demolished a Russian column, and then there was a funny video from Russians driving through all the destroyed equipment, and it was like 5-6 minutes or 10 even minutes of straight driving, and it was just massive amounts of destroyed equipment that was all done by one drone unit. And it's so sometimes there's like more exciting stuff being dropped, but regularly what they show is just massive amount of Russian equipment destroyed, and also making sure that enormous amounts of Russians fall asleep. Very, very many people.
Good night.
Yeah. So, anything else on this topic, Erlend?
Well,
watching all the
I hope
feedback.
I can talk more about how this new brigade is gonna be soon. I'm trying to figure out more stuff and learn more about it. So yeah, hopefully I can at some point talk more about that if I manage to dig up the information that is useful and interesting for the audience. But right now it's kind of hard to know. They're quite secretive at the same time, even if they do publish a lot of content, but they don't really show so much of how the operations are and how they're organized.
I don't know how much we can say. How the Wild Hornets doing? Have we talked to them lately?
Oh yeah. I talked to some people there, and we see. So one thing that is evident, which I knew was going to happen, is that they are very heavily involved with Dronefall and Sky Rusoris. So the two programs that are financing interceptor drones. I'm not sure exactly how much, but they're building a lot of the drones that are being funded by Sternenko and Come Back Alive. So, yeah, I mean, they're doing well for sure.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know. I remember like a while ago we were pretty worried about drone production and whether or not everyone would recognize how important drones were and actually allocate resources to scaling up production for Ukraine. I'm certainly not suggesting that like everything's solved or anything like that, but I think we learned this week that the U.S. spent about 1.5 billion in like discrete aid to domestic Ukrainian drone programs. And I don't know. It seems like I just remember vaguely, like at that time, Andrew said Ukraine needs, I think, around $4 billion or $8 billion worth of investment in their drone programs, and it seems like that about panned out, right? Like the UK gave I want to say 2 billion, and then the US gave 1.5 billion, and then like all the combined like drone capability coalition people gave, I want to say around $1 billion, something like that. So like I don't know. It seems like again, we're not out of the woods yet. Russia is still scaling up production. Ukraine needs more drones. Obviously, like any help people give to any drone stuff is always good stuff. But it seems like the program to increase Ukrainian drone production was significant, and a lot of countries participated in it and gave a decent amount of resources to it. Could have given more. And it had like a really good effect. I think that's like a conclusion we can pretty reasonably draw from, some of the videos we're seeing.
I think so. It's a combined effort. Both logistically, there's components being brought in from Europe and being manufactured in Europe, high quality components, and also Ukraine's domestic production has drastically improved, both when it comes to their own components that they build. But also they have a lot more resources to acquire, high-end components as well, and also scale up production. So, I mean, there's quite well documented that Ukraine's drone program is going very well. What is a more challenging sphere is counter UAS, where Ukraine need more counter UAS radars. They need more systems similar to jammers and microwave weapons, or all these kind of things that are kind of not necessarily yet operational, but being developed because they are on the forefront of new style warfare, and they need this new stuff to be able to actually counter to the best possible way this challenge. And especially the fiber optic drones, you need kinetic or you can't just jam them. You can use microwave weapons and lasers and stuff, but you need some form of kinetic destruction of the drone to intercept it. And Ukraine just needs a lot more of those. And also drone warning systems. I think a lot could be done if they just had enough warning systems.
Yeah, another story I cut this week was that there was a Russian source that said that the military command was going to give 10 days of leave to anyone who could capture one of the Baba Yaga drones. The Baba Yaga drones are these heavy bomber drones that the Ukrainians have been using on the Russians. Both sides agree they've been really devastating for the Russians. And I think Andrew has been someone who's really been talking publicly about how devastating these things have been and how underestimated they've been by everyone who's analyzing this. So I don't know. It seems like just a testament to Ukrainian drone research and manufacturing capabilities that the Ukrainians are developing these drones that are able to confound the Russians so much that they're willing to punish their peasants less if they manage to actually capture one of these things so UG can take it apart and understand how it works.
Yep. And the thing is, what I think has been misinterpreted by a lot of people is that they've either only focused on FPV drones or only focused on fiber optic FPV drones or only on Baba Yagas in their analysis, and they don't really see the combined effort and how they work together in tandem with each other. So this kind of analysis of drone warfare is still kind of poor because there are very few people doing it. It's completely new, and also the resources and available data is limited, and it's also difficult to assess what data is actually representative and what is not, etc. So it's it's a news fair, so there will be a lot of bad analysis and wrong takes, but we try and provide what we can do, what we can contribute to the information sphere when we know we have solid data and actually the time to go through it and publish it, because that's a constraint, of course. This is, by the way, Magyar, I just wanted to share that this guy has a very particular way of talking where he invents terms and words kind of in like a poetic way, where how he talks about the missions, how he talks about the enemy. He invented a lot of funny words. And if you follow people on Telegram, I would highly recommend to follow Magyar. They also have a YouTube channel, so that's where this is shown from. But not everything is, of course, published on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, part of the issue with drones is it's such a catch-all term, right, for so many different systems. Another area where the Ukrainians have been advancing, I would say, just like the Russians aren't even doing anything close, is naval drones, right? I remember last April or something, Budanov made a public comment. He was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna shoot a helicopter down with a robot kayak," and everyone was like, "What? Yeah, right." And lo and behold, last month, the Ukrainians used a naval drone to shoot down a helicopter. I'm not sure. Yeah, several. Yeah, you're right. I'm not sure if they actually downed any of them, but it was mentioned that the helicopters would clearly need to go to repairs for a long time.
It seems like, at least from Russian sources, one helicopter actually went into the sea and lost. The whole crew was lost. So
nice. Yeah, that's great. And I just remember that basically they were like, we're building these naval drones. It's going pretty good, but these helicopters are on our back, man. We're just gonna put a missile launcher on these things and deal with them. And to hear them just speculate that they could do that, and then in 6 months to see that is a reality on the ground. I don't know. There's just something really not just impressive, but also terrifying about how how quickly the drone game is changing and how quickly these capabilities can go from just like a pipe dream where Western analysts are like, yeah, right, to it happening. And then everyone's like, well, of course you could do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, just the scale of evolution here and the pace of evolution in the drone game is really, really difficult, I think, to comprehend. And I think a lot of people take for granted what's going on to a certain degree.
Yeah, and if they had better missiles and better equipment to put on these sea drones, then the results would have been even more devastating for the Russians, right? So they've done, really amazing things with relatively cheap means, but they're getting more and more advanced. And what I see is that, yeah, they're mitigating their problems with the helicopters, but they've also created a platform which, in theory, if it can perform stably enough and also have enough mass, so in enough numbers, it can perform some sort of a similar role to what a frigate would, of course, in a lot smaller capacity. But you have air defense, you have also naval artillery, because they're actually equipping this with artillery rockets as well. I think that's a challenge they still need to figure out how to work, properly field or set a sea, I guess it's called, because you kind of need the artillery rocket to be guided if you launch it from a sea drone, and fire support with machine guns, right? So you have all the elements plus anti-ship, because the drone itself can sink ships, as we've seen that they've done successfully many times. So in theory, this could support a at least smaller naval operation, which I think is, it's very interesting to see how this kind of thing develops with relatively small amount of resources for what it's actually accomplishing. Imagine doing this with conventional forces. We're talking about billions of euros that would have had to be spent to build ships that would do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would take years and years and years. Like Ukraine wouldn't be feasible for Ukraine to build a navy this war to fight Russia. And I would say everyone's right to say that would be a genuinely insane notion. But the fact that they've been able to not just hold their own in the naval theater, but like pretty effectively neutralize Russia's naval advantage. I mean, there was a phase in this war where the whole Snake Island saga, where Russia really had a big, it was a big danger to Ukraine that Russia could get their fleet that close and look around and all that. And then just one other area I want to bring up when it comes to the drones this week is so with Russia and the reports about the drone strikes, you always sort of have to take it with a grain of salt. Like, there's a lot of like, oh, well, the Ukrainians launched, 50 drones and we shot down 48, but like, gee whiz, 2 got through. And you have to wonder, like, did Ukraine really shoot 50 drones, or are the Russians just like, they don't want to admit that they couldn't shoot down like 5 drones? You know what I mean? So it's always a little bit of a crapshoot when it comes to what the Russian reports say. But it's always clear that there are strikes because we see the booms in the footage, and we hear to some extent like civilian reports. But the point is, it seems to me pretty evident that not only the volume of strikes are increasing overall. In other words, the Ukrainians are hitting more and more diverse targets every night, or every few nights, but also that the saturation on the targets are a lot higher than they used to be. So it seems like a pretty regular occurrence. Even if the Russians are lying, if we assume a constant rate of lying, being the algebraic equation RL, Russians times lies, then the lies are getting bigger, correspondingly with, I think, an increase in saturation. So we now hear regularly that 10 drones are targeting like one facility, and that's a lot. Before it was like 3 or 5, right? So even if we assume there's an exaggeration going on, we're talking about an increase in strikes and also saturation. So I don't know, like that program also seems to be a pretty resounding success. I remember you were talking about this a little bit, Erlend, that like it's we were kind of the opinion that Ukraine should probably focus on long range missiles that rather than these attacks didn't look super cost effective from our
Yeah,
standpoint initially. Go ahead.
a year ago we were saying internally at least that, man, like they're building so many different platforms and the success is relatively low compared to the invested amount of money and also resources when it comes to labor to develop a myriad basically of different drone platforms. And yeah, we internally in our group we were saying they should really not be doing this, but I think we were wrong, because we see that the success rate has of course drastically improved, but I do believe that they need to develop missiles as well. I just thought, or we thought, and I agreed that the cost effectiveness seemed to be kind of off.
Yeah, because like a year ago, we were looking at these crappy like civilian modified biplanes going like 10 miles an hour. That's an exaggeration, but like going super slow, and the Russians had enough warning to like get ready for it. Usually, occasionally they would still cause some damage if the Ukrainians either got lucky or the Russians were surprisingly incompetent or just couldn't react for whatever reason. But like in general, it was like these big slow moving things. The Russians had tons of warning. It wasn't difficult. Once you spot it, it took forever to get to where it was going. So the Russians had a lot of time. Now, I don't know what's changed, but it looks like the sophistication has increased substantially, I think, to be hitting this many targets. And then the target list has also expanded quite a bit. Like we were talking about, the Russians have really invested in expanding chemical plants. That seems to be like the Ukrainians are hitting all kinds of chemical plants, and like almost all of them were being actively expanded by the Russians. So I don't know. It seems like the Ukrainians have a very thorough plan to hit Russian logistics at like a very very early in the chain, right? They have a very holistic view of how the Russian logistics system works, and this drone strategy is very integral to them disrupting that chain.
Yeah, and also the strike seems to be more successful in general, like this one, which was specifically against an early warning radar station, which should be relatively well protected, right? So this was, I think it was published earlier today, and this is a massive hit, especially when you think that it was drones. So
yeah, so I don't know anything else on the drone topic, guys. I think it was like a good time to visit it. I think a lot of stuff's been kind of happening, and a lot of developments in the drone field that we haven't super covered. So I think we hit like a lot of good areas. But if there's anything else,
I think Gao has another drone topic actually.
What?
Yeah, you sent me a picture and you said,
Yeah, was for sorry. I was like, what? There was a question from Marino. I don't know if we want to go to Q&A or
yeah, I think it's a good transition since this was
Yeah.
the first question. Yeah.
okay. Just this question, FH1, is that sort of a switchblade? It's not FH1, it's HF1. And that's not sort of a switchblade. How the drone looks is on the screen right now. That was during the visit of our chancellor to Ukraine with Zelensky, and it's basically the drone frame itself is I believe US made, but or from US company, but made in Ukraine. It's the AQ100 bayonet. And Helsing, the company from Germany, which delivers these loitering munitions to Ukraine, they stripped out a lot of the parts and put their own parts in it, and apparently also equipped it with some how can you say AI features, all that kind of stuff. So it's they say it's not effective by jammings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I just saw the question after my segment, and yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the kind of misconceptions about this? Because I think there were a lot of misunderstandings a while ago.
Well, the first report was built, and the image for the article build used was not this drone. The HF1 was the HX2, which is also produced by Helsing. The HX2 Karma. It's a completely different drone with different characteristics. So, for example, the HF1 has a range of about 30 to 40 kilometers, which is good, but not quite as the HX2, which has a range of over 100 kilometers, according to the manufacturer. And yeah, there was a lot of confusion going on because they used a different picture, and yeah, in the end, that's what you see on the screen is what Germany delivers to Ukraine. It's exactly 4,000 loitering munitions Germany will finance. All of them will be delivered this year. And the first ones were delivered at the end of December or the beginning of January. We have now delivered a couple of hundred units, and the remaining will follow in the next months.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. There were a few questions. I'm not sure how well equipped we are with the panel today to answer all of them. So Thierry asks, strikes on infrastructure from Ukraine are mostly accurate, but not powerful enough. A month ago, we talked about new missiles with 1 ton payload. Will they be deployed soon? Do you know? I think we're talking about the Ukrainian missile program, where they have both a cruise missile and a ballistic missile in development, and it's really hard to know, I think.
Yeah, like citation needed on everything we say about missiles. We need one of our missile experts here, at least Colby, who talks to the missile experts enough that he probably would be right. But like my general understanding, right? So background on the Ukrainian missile program, they were developing like a bunch of missiles, like a kind of an unreasonable amount of missiles for their size, like back, 5-10 years ago or something. And they had a missile called Sapson that they were working on. And basically, at a certain point, the story is that it was almost done, that they had to kind of scrap the program because they just didn't have the funding to continue it. And they were like looking at it and going, we can't produce these. So they had Tochka, right? We all remember the Tochkas. And they were like, we just got to, the war's going to happen. We're going to have to use our Tochkas, and we're going to have to rely on Western equipment to replace those. But it's became evident to Ukraine that the war was going to continue, I think. And so at a certain point, they said, we're going to have to, kick up our missile development program again. And they seem to have done that to a certain degree with the Neptune, right? Like they, again, I'm not the best person to talk to specifics about this, but that's how they sank the Moskva, was like they kind of sort of finished one of these missiles and they used it. And then they did, they probably finished the Sapson, but we don't know. And then they developed a new drone called a new missile called Palanitsa. Palanitsa, though, is not as big or sophisticated as like Sapson. Sapson's like a proper, like, national defense budget missile that is probably pretty good. I think the question about Sapson is we have no idea. The last we heard of Sapson, they had a launch vehicle, it looked like, designed for it. It looked pretty close to ready to go. They showed it in a parade. They were pretty proud of it. Then nothing. That's like the last we heard about it. So we don't have any like specific or hard details about Sapson or this new missile program, but it's pretty clear something's going on. And then this Palanitsa drone is, or sorry, I keep calling it a drone, sorry. But it's a small missile according to them. And it's like, it's designed, first off, I want to say it has like a fifth of a, or like, I don't know, if you, like a 20 or 200 kilo payload. I don't remember the size, but it's not 1 ton. I know that. And it's designed to be made like pretty simply, like mass produced cheaply. Comparisons to maybe early World War II rockets or like things like that, right? Like it's supposed to be able to be made out of scrap metal, like welded in a shop and then like just kind of launched. I don't know how accurate these things can be. I don't know how effective they are or anything like that, but that's kind of the idea of it, is to have like a cheap mass produced missile that has range to hit Moscow, I think was kind of the goal of Palanitsa. So I think those are like the three like prongs of the Ukrainian missile program, right? They have this cruise missile, which is the Sapson. They have a ballistic missile, which I don't know anything about, but I'm sure
That's the Sapson.
Oh, that is the Sapson. Okay. And then they have the cruise missile, which is Tochka.
No, Tochka is also a ballistic missile.
Oh, okay. So what's the cruise missile you mentioned?
Korshun, I think.
Korshun. Okay. So I don't know. Yeah, that's if you know of anything about that, you can say. But like, I guess there are five parts to the Ukrainian missile program. They have a naval missile that they were working on Neptune. They have Sapson ballistic missile. They have Tochka. It's like the old ballistic missile that doesn't have really good range. And then they have this Palanitsa. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also like a new drone missile thing that is smaller than the Palanitsa. But of real missiles, I think we're talking Sapson or Grom-2, which is the same, the ballistic missile, and Korshun. The Neptune was already developed, ready, fielded. They've used it a lot, but of new missiles that we don't really have any confirmation of, it's mainly the Sapson and Korshun.
Right. And that's part of the problem. Well, that's why I kept saying drone for Palanitsa, because like some people do refer to it as like a drone. I would say it sounds like more like a missile to me, but the line once you get to Palanitsa level and below, there's like a blurry line between drone and missile, and people kind of debate which is which. But I don't know.
I'm not an expert, so I can't really say any qualified definition of what it is. It's there, it exists. So among new developments that we're kind of waiting for, it's still like Sapson and Korshun, I think. Not sure if Korshun is ever going to be fielded or Sapson, but we'll see. I hope so.
The word missile drone sounds dumb, but it probably will become a thing. I don't know.
So did he also ask something that is relatable? Because he says, currently there are still HIMARS missiles available. That means GMLRS or ATACMS that can be used on HIMARS or M270 or even, what's the German? No, Mars. MLRS systems. And then he asked, but what if it stops? Did no one in the West or Ukraine try to redesign Grad, Uragan, Smerch rockets to be guided, perhaps with laser? I mean, the Smerch and Uragan rockets have guided systems. I'm not sure how much Ukraine can produce of those, but they at least have been used in quite a lot and extensively in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. But I guess we have to ask the American, is the new administration going to continue to provide GMLRS and ATACMS missiles for Ukraine?
I think that's an open question. I don't know. I think it seems like it's one of the things that the army has a decent amount of, because they're trying to upgrade that munition right now, I think. And like, man, this is something, again, I'm not super up to date on, but like my general understanding is there are efforts being made to modernize that ammunition, and what that means, I assume, is that there's going to be a bunch of this stuff laying around that they're going to either have to pay money to like upgrade, or it's just going to be like, they're going to have to get rid of it. So it seems like Gimlers is a good thing to give Ukraine, because that's one of those things. It's like ATACMS, where we just have a bunch of them sitting around. The plan was to literally pay money to destroy them. Might as well just ship them over to Ukraine, because they're going to be good as gold over there. The other thing I would say is probably for money. Like I don't see a universe where the new administration would turn down a contract for Gimlers. Like, let's say Germany bought some Gimlers from the US, then donated them to Ukraine. Like that's probably that would probably be fine. The other thing I wanted to throw on the table, which is weird, but I just want to do it, is if I remember correctly, Turkey has like a NATO compatible Gimlers equivalent. Am I wrong about that, Erlend?
I don't think so. But
Okay.
but I do have guided rocket artillery.
Okay, I thought that we saw those in Ukraine at one point, the Turkish like guided rocket artillery.
Not an expert, sorry.
Okay. I was just like going to say, like, it sounded like I remember before HIMARS was there, it turned out that Turkey had given them those rockets, and they had, kind of similar range and stuff. And it was like, oh, like, didn't know about that. So my point is, there are other options out there. All this to say, there are other options out there besides like Gimlers from the US when it comes to guided rocket artillery. And, I think if Europe was willing to pay, or Ukraine was willing to pay to get guided rockets, I don't see that being a big bottleneck for the Ukrainians. I think that it's going to be a bigger issue to keep the artillery shells flowing. That's going to be a big issue for both sides. And it's going to be like things like the Air Force and stuff like that are going to be more of an issue than the Gimlers. But I don't know.
We'll see.
So, sorry.
I mean, we'll see. The new administration is coming in tomorrow, and I'm sure there's going to be a storm of questions about this topic in the coming weeks, in the press conferences at the White House and Pentagon when they've gotten their new people in, right?
Yeah.
Just for all together, because you mentioned it, I just went to Oryx to just quickly check on MLRS delivered, and there's nothing from Turkey. There's a bunch of HIMARS and M270 equivalents from Germany and Italy, France, and Great Britain, of course. And then there's old Soviet stuff from Czechia, Poland, and Romania, as far as I see. Oh, and Croatia, yeah, but Turkey, nope.
Yeah, I'm dumb. I don't know. I just remember, like, I've been reporting on stuff in the news for a long time. I remember at one point there was a discussion similar to that, but it's been a long time, so I don't want to say anything with any confidence. But I think other countries in the world besides the US have guided rocket systems. Other countries in the world, though, don't have F-16, right? That, like, if the US was seriously like, we're going to restrict Ukraine's access to F-16 technology, it would be difficult because there are so many partner countries that Ukraine has that, do have F-16. But that's something I'm more concerned about than like cutting off the Gimlers tap. I think that Gimlers are relatively common and like not difficult to sustain. Personally, I think yeah. And then artillery shells, the issue is just you need so many more of them. So it's just a matter of like sheer production volume. Like, will Europe ramp up their actual production and actually buy it's not about buying shells or giving Ukraine the shells. It is about literally putting the factories in place to make them. And that's like a huge commitment. So those are the areas I would look at personally. I would look at like artillery shells, and I would look at like air capability when it came to things I'm worried, things that keep me up at night that the West needs to sustain for Ukraine to be alive. And also their budget. Like, let's be real. Like, the Ukrainian economy is. That's another news story. There's a lot of news stories I cut this week. So I want to say Forbes or The Economist released a story that was like an analysis of the Ukrainian economy, and their the general vibe of the report was basically that if you look at the Ukrainian economy and you line it up with Russia, there are a lot of key areas where the Ukrainian economy is doing better than Russia. And, you know, there's like pretty key areas. I'm trying to remember the specifics, but the ones that they cited specifically were the interest rate. Like, they've kept that down compared to Russia. It's like 8% in Ukraine. It's like 21% in Russia, right? They've kept their currency like value, whereas in Russia that's collapsed. After the first, Russia spent a lot of money to prop it up, and then once they couldn't do that anymore, it collapsed. And economic growth, I think Russia's still beating Ukraine, but Ukraine for the first time this year is looking at like a 4% economic growth quarterly. So people think that that rate of economic growth, considering the circumstances, means that their economy is sort of sustainable. They're not looking at an economic precipice in the way that it was kind of possible that they could have been in the past. They did mention, of course, a lot of weak points that the Ukrainian economy has right now. Of course, the fact that they're importing a lot more electricity. Like, before Ukraine was this, before this all happened, Ukraine was exporting electricity to Europe. Now Ukraine is importing a lot. And I want to say, like, the first year they imported like, an amount. And then the next year, like last year, they imported 4 times that amount. I forget the exact amount, but like, you get the idea. Like, the electricity consumption and the need to import it has increased. I shouldn't say consumption, but the need to increase electricity from imports from other countries has gone up a lot. And also, if the Ukrainian economy is to grow, like, they need energy to do that. Like, I think the assumption, the first year when all this was happening, the Ukrainian economy was taking a dive because of the war anyway. And so electricity consumption went down. It was a lot like COVID, right? Like, they had to shut down some power plants because like demand was just down. They didn't have to air condition giant malls and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of what happened in Ukraine at first, but now the economy is actually starting to like wind back up, even though the war's going on, and that's going to require energy, right? So that's a key area. I don't know. There's a lot of key areas where the Ukrainian economy is on shaky ground, but the economic picture for Ukraine is not a disaster. And I think that like economists looking at the two scenarios side by side right now would argue that Russia is a less stable country economically than Ukraine, which I think is a pretty big milestone for Ukraine. And I just wanted to mention that as like, kind of an interesting news report. I don't think I was able to read the actual article because it was behind a paywall, but I read articles about the article, as you do when you're poor like me. It was, I don't know, it seemed like a good, even-handed economic report. I would maybe recommend people go read the free articles about the article. If anyone else wanted to say anything about that.
So a question that is relatable to this. Andrew Perpetua often stresses the importance of mortars. Is Ukraine producing enough mortars domestically? And is Ukraine producing 155 shells too? That was a question from Callan. Well, no, Ukraine is not producing enough mortars, but they are producing a lot of them. Same with shells. There is no way Ukraine would be able to produce enough to because you would, basically you will shoot as much mortar fire as you can in this kind of war. And enough mortar shells is as many so that any mortar team can fire basically the entire time that they are in contact. That's never going to be feasible, but they're getting more than they did a year ago, it seems. And yes, Ukraine are producing 155 shells. How many? Not sure. How successful they have been with the new Newly set up production lines for 155 shells is something that we really don't have any information about. But I mean, they've been reporting that they do produce 155 shells domestically, so gotta have to just believe them on that.
Yeah, like part of the issue, right, is that well, there's a couple things, but I think we'll start at the beginning, right, which is the bottleneck here for global artillery shell production appears to be the chemicals needed, like basically the TNT that you need to make these things go boom.
Also
yeah.
the steel. Like the steel is
Yeah.
like very specific steel is needed, and you know you need the specific steel for the kind of forge that you have, because some forges are heated by gas, some with induction.
Well, are you talking about mortars and artillery or both?
Artillery.
Okay, yeah. Well,
And this is a resource that is not. It's a finite resource. as
yeah, well, that's kind of what I was going to get into with that is like, I think Colby is right that like Europe and the US should focus on artillery shells. And I think Ukraine should probably focus on mortars because of that reason, right? Like it, and also you mentioned before, like you kind of implied it, but I'll just like clarify. Like Ukraine was trying to start up a 155 artillery shell production program before the war. And as far as I understand it just wasn't successful. Like it's not as easy as you would think to build an artillery shell for like all the reasons you just described, and like Daniela will explain in extreme detail if you give him a platform like we're crazy enough to do. Yeah, like so that's part of the issue is like there's a limited amount of explosive and there's a limited amount of material, and countries should probably focus on what they can do successfully. And I think Ukraine can probably produce mortars successfully, and then Europe should probably focus on shells, and the U.S. What do you think?
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, they've been given resources from us to set up 155 production lines.
That's
and
true.
they
This time
can't.
it's going to be different. You're right. They have partnerships with Western companies and like
Yeah.
support they didn't have before. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, particularly Namo and Rheinmetall are both announced, and also are, I don't know, development with Rheinmetall, but Namo is working on the production line in Ukraine. So not sure if the Rheinmetall announcement is about a different production line, probably. But these things are, we don't see any video or pictures or reports about these factories. We don't know where they are. So it's going to be very difficult to report anything on the development, and also how successful they are is going to be hard. I think maybe if you can get hold of some information from Ukrainian artillery units that know what ammo they're getting and how successful it is, then you can probably figure it out. But that would also be probably military secrets that they're not allowed to give up. So
Yeah, like we've seen a few scattered pictures, and they're like, these are Ukrainian produced shells, and we like kind of look at them, and it seems true. Like it doesn't seem like they're overtly not Ukrainian shells, but we don't know what that means in terms of the scale of what they're producing or anything like that. We know, like, it seems to be true that they've made some shells, but we don't know what that means really.
Just want to add two things. First, the Ukrainian made shells. The only shells I saw, I don't know what about Erlend, but the only shells I saw was 122. I haven't seen a domestically produced 155 shell yet. And the Rheinmetall factory, the latest update we had, and was a couple of months ago, was from Rheinmetall that they're set, or from Pappberger, more specific, the CEO, who said that they're still looking for a location. And yeah, that's the last update we have.
okay. No, I don't remember 155 shells, but I heard that. I think CJ told me this, or told us this, that Ukrainian 155 shells that they produced, I think already in 2022, were problematic. Like they were not. That was unsuccessful. Not sure exactly what it was, but that probably the machining or the forging of the shells was not accurate enough to be used in Western systems or something like that. But yeah, that was a failure, and we'll see how the Namo project and the Rheinmetall project is developing.
But yeah, I would say, just to get back to, because I think the subject of the question was mortars. Mortars are very important. They're very, as Erlend said, like you want them firing all the time. One of the things I think that really gives them an advantage in, so I'll put it this way. Long ago, I interviewed a mortar guy just about mortars and like just for this Ukraine stuff. And these are things I picked up from that conversation. Obviously, I don't personally know a lot about mortars, but I kind of remember that conversation to a certain degree. Also, maybe we can get mortar guy on, Scotty, if we want to talk to a mortar guy. So if Chad, if you overwhelmingly show your love for mortars, it might happen. But anyway, I would say that one of the important things about mortars is that the people lower on the chain of command can call it in, and that's really helpful, right? Because you have guys on the ground, they're in, with guns, and they're like, there's a building over there I don't like, it's shooting at me. And normally they gotta like call their boss and be like, boss, can we please get some artillery going? And then they gotta call somebody else, and they're like, can we make a fire mission? And like that's a whole deal, like to get that all set up. Whereas like a mortar team, like it's someone that's almost like on close to their equal on the chain of command. And so they can just call up the mortar people and be like, hey, I need a shell like on top of that building. Another thing mortars can do that's really, really useful is they can literally fire them inside buildings. Like if you knock out like a section of a wall, look, there are precautions that need to be taken. You got to be real careful when you're firing a mortar inside a building. Let me tell you that. But you can do it, right? You can fire from like a really covered position. Like, let's say you're in an urban battlefield, right? Like a 155, you can't be dragging that around the streets, the mean streets. So like you have this ability to get like a overhead artillery thing. That's probably not the right word. An overhead weapon, a weapon that shoots up in the air and falls
Indirect
down.
fire.
Thank you. Indirect fire. You have an indirect fire option in areas that you otherwise wouldn't have, because you can maneuver them in places that are really tight, and they're very powerful. What they sacrifice compared to an artillery shell is range. In other words, a big old mortar shell is almost as boomy as a big old artillery shell. It just doesn't. It can only fire from real close. That's the weakness that you get in artillery terms. Close anyway.
Well, yeah, it doesn't produce the same kind of shrapnel though, but yeah, I mean, it definitely can deliver a lot of boom. But yeah, I can see in chat that someone is mentioning that Kellendon had some info from a mortar team that from August they said they are no more hindered by amount of shells mostly. I've seen these kind of reports as well, but I've also seen massive amount of reports like they don't really have enough overall mortars, and that they are to large extent using drones to mitigate that.
Yeah,
With
I think
success,
I do
but
know.
still, it would be better for Ukraine to have enough mortar ammo.
Yeah, like mortar crew, I'll put it this way. It seems like probably it's difficult to have trained personnel up. You need someone who is really smart and physically capable and willing to take initiative to run a mortar team, basically. And I would imagine that it's difficult to keep those crews staffed with enough people to shoot all those shells. But yeah, that's just me. I don't know. But I think also, right, you're dealing with a lot of different units, and some of them have the old Soviet. Some of them have old Soviet stuff that is like genuinely garbage, right? And some of them have like new NATO stuff, and some of them have decent Soviet stuff. So it's just like a real like diverse array of equipment. And then of course different parts of the front are being prioritized. So some areas are given very little and told like you've got to make this work because we've got to send extra resources over here. So yeah, I think you're right. It seems like a mixed bag. I do know that like when the U.S. sends aid, they used to tend to send a decent amount of mortar along with it. I don't know if that's still the case, but I would guess that there's enough mortar laying around that if the West wasn't being negligent, they could send enough to keep Ukraine satisfied for a while when it came to general mortar usage, just because it is difficult to get those teams and get them in place. So I don't see them just having. It's not quite like artillery where it's just like unlimited. You're shooting unlimited shells all the time, and you need to keep them going. There is a certain level of like mortar teams need to get everything in position and get close to the enemy to make it work. So I don't think you need quite as many. You still need a lot. You want to be firing that thing a lot, but it's not quite as big of a thing. That's why we hear so much about the artillery and like 7 million, artillery shells and all that.
Not sure if did anyone see any more questions that we didn't address here?
Someone said, Stephen, was it? Sorry, I've submitted a couple of questions above without at Tochnyi. We should look. Have we addressed them already?
There.
See.
So Stephen asks, as Russia seems to be better at suppressing information about hits deep in Russia, do you see any signs of Ukrainian strikes that are not documented by leaked video?
Yeah, sometimes. Ukraine
sometimes Ukraine report, but sometimes Ukraine reports that they hit targets, and then there's not enough proof to geolocate and stuff. I would say that does happen.
Yeah, definitely. Like so one thing I should make clear, guys, is that I only report on the Ukrainian strikes. I will say, like, Russia strikes Ukraine every day. It's pretty bad. It's a lot of civilian targets. It's a lot of hospitals. It's a lot of schools. You see the footage after the fact, and it's very clear that they are hitting civilian targets. Very real people their lives are being affected by all of this. And, all of that's real. The only reason I don't report on it is it would be horrifically depressing for us every day to look at this footage of injured, crying women and children being bombarded by Russian drones and artillery shells. It's messed up. And it feels a little better. And also the sheer amount of up until this week, I had at least been able to keep track of all of the strikes from Ukraine into Russia, the deep strikes. Whereas with the Russian hits on Ukraine, it's honestly difficult to keep track. One thing I will say about the strikes on Ukraine, though, Erlend, maybe you can back me up on this or disagree. When an important facility in Ukraine is hit, it's usually not publicly known what happened. Like we get rumors about what happened, but we don't usually get like footage or like on the record reports about what happened. We just hear like a military base was hit or like a depot was hit or a factory was hit. They're pretty good about keeping quiet when something important was hit, and you don't see a lot of reports. Whereas in Russia, like there's just some dude who's like got a Telegram channel called like "This is Rostov," and he's just like filming a giant chemical plant on fire. It's not quite like that in Ukraine, or would you disagree?
No, that's true. Ukraine is a lot better at explaining to people why they shouldn't publish this kind of footage, because it gives the enemy a battle damage assessment, of course. But in the end, I think Ukraine knows pretty well how successful their strikes were, even if these videos are not leaked, maybe not as fast, but they have access to GeoInt that is a lot more capable than what is out there for civilians. So they can see through clouds and stuff with radar imagery. So I think they know pretty fast if a hit was successful or not. And that's why we see the Ukrainians say like we struck the airport and then there's no video sometimes. But most of the times we see videos of burning facilities. So from swearing Russians from their balconies.
Yeah, it's but yeah, so I don't. I think if you just only use Tochnyi as your source of Ukraine news, it would look kind of biased, like Ukraine's hitting Russia all the time and Russia's not hitting Ukraine, and that's just not true. Like Russia does hit Ukraine. Even though they're a lot of times their targeting is bad, and I would say especially earlier in the war, it seemed like they were literally just using old Soviet maps, and they were looking and being like, there used to be a military base here, and then they would hit it, and it's like, that's a McDonald's now. But speaking of, the first McDonald's in Ukraine was damaged by a Russian missile this week. There's so many news reports that I cut that I'm like remembering during the stream. It's good. I'm sad that the missile hit McDonald's though. Anyway, all this to say, like, Russian missiles do hit Ukraine. It's bad, but I think that the Russians have tried to have the same level of information security on this stuff, and I don't think they've been very successful at it for whatever reason. And one of the things I do know that Ukraine has done, they've had, as Erlend said, it's like against the law to like publish stuff about this, and they've taken it pretty seriously. There was a little phenomenon of like Ukrainian influencers kind of like, filming themselves during strikes and things like that. And there were a couple of like high profile like arrests and like charges that were brought on certain like high profile Ukrainian internet personalities. And I think that did a lot to like stop people from posting, to show like there were real consequences for doing it. And Ukraine seems to be good at like, if things are, the reason that they're careful about that stuff, especially early on, is Russia does something called double tap, which means they'll like hit a target and then they'll wait for the rescue crews to show up and the fire crew and all that. And then those people will be looking for bodies and digging out rubble, and then they'll hit it again, right? So they don't like to show footage of the site immediately after to allow for a double tap. And also, in general, too, you just don't want to show your enemy like, here's what your strike did, here's the battle assessment damage, like here you can show this in your report. So yeah, in general, I think Ukraine's done a good job of like keeping that information under wraps. Whereas for whatever reason, even though it seems like Russia has tried, just maybe because the facilities are just so darn big and like the booms are just so darn big, it seems difficult for Russia to be able to like keep quiet that there's a giant chemical fire. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Erlend, or we can probably move on? It's a long ramble. Sorry.
There's another question, and then I think we can wrap up. It has to go through 2 readouts here because it's too long. Soluzhny wrote that the war wouldn't see any drastic changes to the front line unless one side can introduce significant new weapons. And second part says, I'm fed up with watching and asking if there will be enough Gimler shells and that there's too little air defense and so on. Can you recommend any way to help Ukraine in developing new strike capabilities? Well, it's true. Soluzhny said that unless there is a tip in technological and sheer military power, so either enough of everything that Ukraine asked for, and he listed up a whole lot of things that Ukraine needed with numbers and what they needed as well in an essay, and published it in, I think, The Economist. Then we won't see any drastic changes to the front lines. This was in 2023 or late 2022, I think. And I would say that his assessment is fairly right. There's no like overmatch from either of the sides when it comes to either technology or strike capabilities, that can kind of turn the tide of a battle. I don't know how we can what we can recommend, but one thing that I think could potentially fix this is that Ukraine just needs to get enough money to fund all their weapons programs, and we don't need the US for this. Europe could easily fix it. It's just there is no political will to address it, or there is political will but not enough. So I think that's the easiest answer to this question. If it's the fastest, no, it's not. That would be to supply Ukraine with everything it asks for. But the most realistic, I think, is to, in some way or form, if it's through loan or through different financing programs, making sure Ukraine has enough money and resources to everything that they can produce domestically.
And
Yeah.
I just, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, what you specifically can do is, of course, not developing in your like strike capability or anything like that, but maybe spare a pizza or so at the end of the week and just donate like 10 or 20 bucks to Ukrainian unit. If everyone would do that, then it would already makes a huge difference for the people on the ground. Yeah, I think that's very, very much necessary, and I hope that everyone at least thinks about like saving maybe a coffee or whatever a month and just send the money to Ukraine, to the unit, so they can buy stuff for themselves.
So I don't know. I think there's like a couple ways to approach that question. It's kind of a big topic. Like from a technological standpoint, right? Is have we reached a stalemate for technological reasons, basically, or is it kind of other reasons? And I think that if I'm trying to think about like, are there any capabilities Ukraine still doesn't have? I think there's maybe a few that probably aren't as important, and like one that probably is, but they maybe already have it. I'll put it that way. So one that maybe comes to mind is like naval operations or riverine operations. Ukraine has some people capable of that, but like most of the footage we've seen of riverine operations in Ukraine on both sides, it's kind of sloppy stuff. It's not the super sophisticated stuff, and also I don't think either side. The fact that the Russians are even contemplating trying to cross that river is kind of insane. So I don't think it would be a good idea really to even attempt it, but it maybe would be a good capability that Ukraine has. They do seem to be like crazy water wizards. Especially earlier in the war, there was a lot of like they would strategically destroy bridges and things and like cut off Russian logistics using the river systems. But but they probably need like more boats and more equipment to do stuff like that. But when it comes to like real strategic capabilities, I think there's probably like two that come to mind, right? The first is the ability to hit Moscow with like a serious payload. That would be, I think, a game changer for Ukraine. Whether they developed it internally or someone as crazy as the French just said, "Here's a missile. We don't care what you do with it," and they were able to just hit Moscow. I think that would really change the strategic situation. That being said, I think Ukraine already seems to have like the ability to hit Moscow with drones. They've done this before, and I'm not sure. It seems like they don't do it regularly, maybe because they don't want to, or they're showing some level of restraint, or maybe that the failure rate's just too high. Like it's hard to say why, but they don't do it very often. They've only attempted like a major strike on Moscow with drones like a couple of times. And it seems to me like it was sort of um, some kind of an escalatory response. Like it seemed to happen when Russia was bombing Ukraine in a way that Ukraine really didn't like. And then they go, fine, we're going to launch so many drones at Moscow. You have to close the Moscow airport. What do you think about that? And then like kind of it goes away for a while. So I think that would be a strategic capability though that would really change the game. If Ukraine could hit like a military base in Moscow with a missile and just, look at them, that would be a big deal. But I think like as far as like Zelensky stuff, this became a war of attrition, I think already. And I just like we do have some military analysts, in the group that are, I don't know, smarter than me. And whenever I kind of ask about this stuff, that's usually what they say to me. It's like, well, don't look at the front line and call it static. Like what's going on is huge attritional losses of equipment, probably on both sides, but specifically for Russia, right? Look at how much equipment Ukraine is destroying. And is Russia able to actually sustain that when Russia runs out of stockpiles and actually has to use real production numbers to sustain their military? Like, what will that look like, right? So that would maybe be my thing is like, I don't know if the framing of the problem is necessarily correct to call it like a static front and to say that there are no breakthroughs. The Kursk offensive was a breakthrough, and it looks like it was designed specifically because Ukraine understands this is a war of attrition and that the front line isn't as important as attriting the Russians. But I don't know. Like, there's definitely, I would say earlier on, there was more of a view of a maneuver. Like, I think when the counteroffensive failed, that was when Ukraine decided it's a war of attrition, and they've just got to deal with that reality. But anyway, there was like one other question, Erlend, I wanted to bring up. It was first off, there's a quick thing about Snake Island. Someone said they saw that it was on fire. Which sounds likely. I don't know about that, but I just want to do a quick update. So if you guys remember, there were cats on Snake Island when Ukraine liberated it, and they rescued at least one cat. I don't know how many cats there were. I want to say there were multiple. One of the cats, the main cat, was adopted this week. So that's good. The Snake Island cat is now adopted. And then the other one was someone asked about, like, do drones hit radar systems? Does that mean they have like a radar seeking drone? That's just a quick answer that I know of. Like, drones do hit radar systems. We see that sometimes. It's not super often. And the reason for that, I think, is because there are missiles that Ukraine has that can fulfill that function, which is the HARMS missile. That's like a radar seeking missile. It's a pretty simple concept. It looks for the thing that's emitting the most, like electrical signal, basically, and it's drawn to that. So there's ways to fool it. You can like build reflectors and make decoys and things like that to try to fool it. But as far as I know, U.S. HARMS are pretty good. They've done a pretty good job in Ukraine, and I think that's probably the main reason we don't see a lot of drone strikes on radar systems, although it's not like uncommon. We do see drone strikes on radar systems. Anything about that, Erlend, about radar seeking drones?
I've heard talk about it, but I haven't seen any evidence that that's something they developed.
Yeah, like a radiation
Wouldn't
missile. Yeah, that's what it's called. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't anti-radiation missile. I wouldn't be surprised if Ukraine managed to field some sort of anti-radiation drone. It would be very useful to use and employ something against jammers, like a homing drone against jammers.
And yeah, it seems like that stuff's all really important. Like having good radar coverage, having having drones that can destroy radar and jammers. It's really important because jammers are something that the Ukrainians seem to be, like, the fact that the Ukrainians are operating so freely with drones on the front line is really significant. And it seems like Russia doesn't have as easy of a time of it for whatever reason. And we think a lot of that comes down to electronic warfare, but we don't know. So having drones that can take out jammers is probably really important for Ukraine. And then just the ability to destroy radar. Like, Russia can't replace radars easily. Like, they don't really, a lot of those components are imported. They're really expensive. Some of them are like Soviet stuff. They don't really have the capacity to do anymore. Like, so yeah, like, radars are sort of an irreplaceable commodity in Russia. And they have lots and lots and lots of S-300 launchers and S-300 missiles. But I don't know how many radars they have for all those systems, or how many engineering vehicles they have for those systems. Those are probably, when it comes to Russia, the things you want to look at, rather than like how many raw numbers of tanks or missiles or anti-aircraft or AA systems they have. Like, what about the other stuff? That, can they still produce the engineering vehicles? Can they still produce the radars? Blah blah blah. Anyway, anything else, Erlend, or we can probably wrap it up?
I think we need to wrap up. It's been 2 hours almost.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I guess we need to find some mortar people that can explain more about mortars, and we can have. I would definitely appreciate asking a mortar specialist about mortars in Ukraine.
Let's see if we can get Scotty on. I don't think he knows anything about Ukraine, but he's a U.S. mortar guy. He can at least tell us about how mortars work. And I think probably a lot of that craft is applicable to Ukraine. If we can get a Ukrainian mortarman on, that would be awesome. If we can maybe arrange a panel discussion, that would be crazy. But we'll do our best. This is why we don't usually talk about this stuff on stream, because now everyone's expectations are sky high.
No,
But,
I mean, maybe someone in the audience can direct someone or
yeah.
you know,
We'd
give some
be-
tips. Okay.
Tell your Ukrainian mortarman friends. We want to arrange a sit down. All right. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to our live audience. We do appreciate all your questions. We do our best to answer you. So thanks for asking all your great questions. Thank you to our great panel. I know everyone's been a little busy lately, so appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to come and do your segments and help with the stream and put on a good broadcast for the good people. Thanks, of course, to the audience that listens to the recorded show. We appreciate you too. We know that not everyone has time. Some people are probably at church and whatnot. So yeah, thanks for tuning in later on. Please, if you could, hit that subscribe button to keep updated on our future content, but also hit that like button on that stream. Hit the bell, do all that good YouTube stuff so that they don't. We just know they're gonna demonetize this video, guys. We will take bets after this whether or not they demonetize it, and everyone will bet yes. But anyway, thanks so much for everyone's support, and we will, of course, as always, see you next week, 2100 Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
On behalf of the brave.